President Cyril Ramaphosa has defended Police Minister Bheki Cele's performance amid rising crime levels across the country. When questioned in Parliament, Ramaphosa blamed the rampant crime to inequality and the impact of COVID-19. Opposition parties and civil society organizations have been calling on the Police Minister to be fired for failing to deliver his mandate. We're now joined by crime expert Eldred De Klerk. Eldred, thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. Is it as simple as putting it down to just the Minister of Police, or is it more complicated than that?
Good afternoon, and it's a lot more complicated than like that. So thank you for prefacing the question in the way that you did. We have this idea in South Africa generally that we can just replace people and one individual will make a difference. Yes, there is the tall tree theory that, when you stand tall, nobody around you can perform. But in fact, what we have the opposite here, we have a minister whose efforts at holding the police accountable, especially, and it started with General Cyril, in terms of irregular appointments, in terms of restructuring, was actually thwarted in his efforts to hold them accountable, and there was internal resistance to different moves that the minister needed to make. So the minister, in his enthusiasm, in his utterances at times, is his own worst enemy, because he carries his heart on his sleeve, and then there is a resistance to what he's trying to do, and he never comes back and takes the public into his confidence to say, I was trying to effect changes to the legislation, and the police are standing in the way. This is the changes I want to bring. I want to make sure that no general can just irregularly appoint people without due process, and where even if the Act allows for them to do so, those circumstances have to be spelled out. I'm just mentioning a few examples. And there's internal resistance to that. So the minister in enthusiasm sometimes makes utterances around road units, around legislation that needs to change, around making promises to community to mobilize more policing resources in a fiscally constrained and a definitive environment with finite numbers of officers that truly cannot be just pushed from side to side around the country, for example. So sometimes the minister needs to hold back, hold his tongue, curb his enthusiasm, and rather try to work with the police and with communities to effect changes, including the so-called opposition parties who have ideas, who have resources, and have knowledge and have insight, and they should also come to the table.
Absolutely. Just yesterday we were speaking to a policing union, and they spoke to the 10,000 deployment of police officers, characterizing it essentially as a mess, where even this week a police officer shot his supervisor and then turned the gun on himself because of irregularities that are happening in the background. What would it then take to clean up the police force so that it shows up for society?
Well, we need to take ourselves seriously, and this is where we're letting ourselves down once again. We've had the National Development Plan 2030, for example, and 2030 is around the corner. I think we've had that plan since 2012. That plan, even though it's not a plan, in essence that it lays down a step-by-step, but it lays down really clear principles and intentions. And one of those intentions, for example, if we want to deal with the image of the police and we want to deal with the structure of the police, it says that all senior police management and leadership must be subjected to a competency audit so that we can understand that they're in the right position, fulfilling the right tasks with the right support, lifestyle audit, and integrity audit. And that would go a long way to allay and reassure us as public that the men and women who serve us in those responsible positions are people with integrity and are people who will not just respect the law, they'll uphold the law. Then we have a minister who has to use these departments, weak as they are, and I have to admit, because I've been there, that the Department of Police in itself is hollowed out and it's weak. And I'm talking about the Civilian Secretariat, Departments of Community Safety at the provincial level, IPID, and the advisors around the minister. You would have hoped that the minister, having been reappointed as a minister not too long ago, when everybody thought that he made that point, would have seen that he needed a strategy for the South African Police Service. Part of that strategy was provided by the findings of the provincial task team, but also the panel of experts who gave a 600-page report with a whole body of evidence, best practice and best ideas, put it against work in similar settings that are post-colonial, like India, Brazil, even Russia, for example. And it could have served as a guiding document to the minister to put down a strategy of transformation in the police, but also to tie the work of the police into the developmental needs of South Africa. And this is where I think sometimes the president also needs to take a breath, because he's right in saying that it's not just socioeconomic, but it's also the political economy of the country. And it's also the fact that we have this endemic, wicked problems around poverty, that COVID has definitely shown up to be so in terms of health access, food security, energy security. And the police has a role to play in fulfilling the developmental agenda of South Africa. We look to the minister as the public representative to provide the South African Police Service with that guiding strategy. They then have to operationalize that strategy in terms of they being responsible for the how of policing. And then the performance has to be set down by you and I. So since we have no performance standards for when police does stuff well and for when they do it badly, all we really see is that the fear of either being threatened by contact crime or having experienced contact crime is terrifying and is debilitating. And all we want to see is our material circumstances change. And yet at the same time, we haven't set down performance standards for these young men and women who go out every day and they don't have the leadership, they don't have the guidance, they don't have the supervision to be able to guide them both on paper and in practice as to what a good job looks like.
Thank you very much to Eldred De Klerk. He's a crime expert.